You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Friday, October 25th. The 49ers are trying to get another win on the board, and this feels like a really good week to do it. It's Dallas week. It's Sunday night football, so definitely going to be talking about the favorable and not so favorable matchups with my guy, KP. Dude, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Probably time to turn the page from last week, right, and talk about beating up on little brother. Yeah, I'm doing well. No complaints. How's life?
Life is okay, because thankfully life outside of the 49ers is great. So yeah, we still have that. But as always, we start this episode looking at the 49ers latest injury updates. And so we have Dezi here. Dezi, welcome. Thank you again for joining us on a Friday, as you always do. We got some news from the 49ers side. Juwan Jennings with his hip injury is going to be out in this one. Jake Moody's still out. Kevin Givens dealing with the groin injury is out. Now, another player that's obviously out that I want to talk about, right, is Brandon Ayuk, because we got more information throughout this week about Brandon Ayuk, and, he tore his ACL, MCL, and there could potentially be more. So, Dezi, what do you know about that injury and maybe how long he could be out with that one?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we all saw that injury. I think you have a picture of it somewhere, but it's, there it is. So essentially what happened is a planted foot and a stress that goes from lateral to medial, opening up the inside part of that knee joint, really just adds a stress. It's very characteristic for an ACL tear. There's four major ligaments in the knee: the ACL, the PCL, crisscross in the middle, and what the ACL does is it helps prevent your femur bone from sliding forward on top of your tibial bone. On the sides are your MCL and LCL, so those help with translation side to side on the knee. So he's torn the MCL, the ACL, so he's got instability on both aspects, so both forward and back, as well as side to side. With that injury, it's likely he has a meniscus tear as well. Most of them are on the lateral meniscus. It used to be something called the unhappy triad, which was your ACL, your MCL, and your medial meniscus. But that was back in the 30s when this was first presented. And since then, a lot of research has come down the pike showing that it actually is more likely to have a lateral meniscus tear with it. None of that particularly matters. It's the ACL reconstruction that's going to be the basis of his prognosis. The thing that would be the kind of throw things off would be how severe is the MCL tear. Most MCL tears are just going to scar in, and there's not a lot that needs to be done. But if there needs to be a reconstruction of the MCL, that would disrupt the timeline. So if we're talking about pure ACL injury, just the ACL has been injured, the average return to play is about 10.9 months after the injury, right? So I would suspect this would be a little bit later than that, given that he also has the MCL and meniscus tear. It might be a little bit more sensitive to recurrence of inflammation or effusion, which is also fluid in the knee. So he might just have a little bit more of a trickier time coming back. But that's kind of what we know about his current injury. Now, there's a couple of interesting studies that I looked up. One was from 2016. They looked at a lot of different big joint tear or injuries. They looked at ACLs, Achilles tendon, and patellar tendon tears. And they all were the ones that had the greatest impact on a player's career. So what it found is in the NFL specifically, there was a decreased performance at their 1 year return back from the injury. So we can expect him to have a slow start. But in this study, it says that there was a recovery to baseline the 2 to 3 years following that. Then you go on to understand that there is a reduction in the lifespan of their career in the NFL by about 1.9 seasons. So his season may be cut a little bit short. add on that 50% of athletes with this type of injury, the unhappy triad, will have osteoarthritis initiating at 10 to 20 years out from this injury. So I just like to throw that out there because we're, as fans, we're looking at the career part, but also as a human being, you have to understand that this is the toll that these players take to live their dream, to be out there and to have, these illustrious careers. It does take a toll. And so early onset of arthritis is one of those setbacks that he'll have following his career.
It sounds like that's pretty much half a contract that he's going to lose because of this. Like, that's pretty damning when you think about it. Did you know right away when you saw the hit? Because like my first thought was knee going inward, worst possible scenario.
Yeah, it was pretty, and my husband's a physical therapist. He doesn't always watch the games with me, but it just so happened he was sitting right next to me and both of us were like, damn, that's an ACL. And then I was like, or MCL if there's no ACL, right? Just because there's so much pressure on that inside part of the knee. And it just so happened, to be both. So this was not a good injury. It was heartbreaking.
November, is that what we're thinking realistically for him to come back next November?
I think that's probably the timeline that I would expect. To your point, Kyle, let's be thankful that he got the contract that he did. How horrible would this be if he didn't get that contract for this young player and that kind of money? And, I know there's some fans that may think otherwise, right? We paid and now we're not getting a return on the investment. But, just as, again, from a human standpoint, I think this is such a hard career or a hard injury to come back from. But, you look at Nick Chubb, right? Nick Chubb had even a worse injury than this, and he's returning now. So we can take a look at that and see, there's still a potential that he can get back to his baseline. I think I read somewhere else that if you were, you were more likely to have a better return to play if you were drafted 1 through 3. So that's got it, that's in favor of him, right? And if you were lower in the draft, that it was less, it was less of a chance that you'd come back and have be at your baseline or even close to your baseline following.
I wonder how much of that is just, getting more of a chance because you're a high draft pick, which he's going to get all the opportunities possible. Like, think about what they just paid him. Think about what he's meant to the offense. John Lynch actually said on the radio last week, he felt like Ayuk had his best practice. Lynch said Ayuk had the best practice of any wide receiver that he's seen from a 49er. Like, that's how well he felt like he practiced. Wow. So to hear that and to come out and see what happened in the second quarter, just brutal. So what I imagine, like in my experience, athletes the year after is when you see like them return to form. So I'm glad you did bring that up because I've seen that firsthand.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is I feel gutted for Ayuk, right? And just hearing what you had to say about it, it doesn't make me feel better, right? Like it almost makes it seem that much worse. And yeah, definitely gutted for him and what this could mean for his career. But as we've been saying this week on the show, the fact that he got his deal is, I think, the one solace we can all find, and I'm sure he's thinking about that too in the back of his mind throughout all this. So yeah, thanks Dezi for giving us some more clarity on that. And I'm sure we'll have many more discussions, in like the next year about it as well. But Dezi, I also want to ask you about Deebo Samuel, because last week, it was strange how it all kind of happened and how we all kind of came to know that Deebo Samuel had pneumonia. Like, we just knew he was ill. It looked like he tried to warm up in this game. You see the picture from the left that we're showing here was from his warm-ups. Everyone immediately assumes the worst, or just looking at his body, right? But what can you tell us about maybe why he looked that way?
Yeah, so there was a lot going around on Twitter that was saying that kind of poking fun at his weight, and I don't get me on that soapbox. I just absolutely hate that. There's no space for that. This was a rib plate that we found out later, that he was wearing, putting all of this together, we knew that he had an illness coming in. We weren't real sure about which one. It was concerning when I saw an oxygen mask on him. Again, he's young, he's an athlete. yes, we can get pneumonia. We wear ourselves down. He's got a young baby at home. So my tweet was like, welcome to fatherhood, Deebo. You're going to pick up everything your kid's going to bring home. But then, you saw how severe it was with the oxygen. And so to me, the big question was, I'm going to kind of explain how we develop pneumonia. In most cases, this, especially after surgery, when you're not up and active like you're normally able to do. So following surgery, right, we give you breathing apparatuses to help inflate the lungs, because what happens after surgery, or even when you're incredibly sick, is we lay around. We don't do much at all. We're just Netflix and chill on the couch, right? Maybe you're just sleeping and Tylenol and ibuprofen. So what happens is, when we're not doing our day-to-day and we're not, running to our car, running into the grocery store, coming back out, our lungs just kind of do these baby breaths, and we're not getting those big periodic bigger deep breaths in. So at the microscopic end of your lungs, it looks like, picture like grapes. And that's where the air exchange happens at the microscopic levels. And you've got like these little air sacs that look like grapes. Well, when you don't use your whole lung field like that, they start to collapse. Those little air pockets collapse, and then fluid builds up. And then that's when pneumonia sets in. So my question here, and the thing that was interesting to me, was the rib plate. Does he have a rib injury? And then he got sick and it led him susceptible to pneumonia? Or did they know he had pneumonia going in and the rib plate was supposed to protect him? I'm not quite sure why he had the rib plate on. It was perplexing to me, and I don't know the answer to that. But now we see Deommodore Lenoir is sick, and you wonder if this is something contagious that now maybe is being passed around the team, which I don't love to hear that. And you think about COVID. I don't want to say that that's what it is, but COVID is much more, and even the flu or COVID, those are the things that can really knock you out and really cause the flu in a young adult like that.
That was my initial reaction, was thinking like COVID-like symptoms, because think about everything that you just described, or everything that came out about what Deebo had. I was like, oh, it's probably that. But Lynch actually said they didn't know about Deebo until they were on the field warming up. He said one of the trainers came up to him and was like, hey, like, he's having trouble breathing. And that's when they had to deal with it. So we're talking like 90 minutes before the game even started that they were aware of it.
And that sounds very flu or COVID. Like those, like you can go from 0 to 90 in like 2 seconds. Like you can go from like, it just hits you like a ton of bricks and you just start this downhill spiral of just not feeling well. So interesting.
Well, it's incredible that, he had such a short stay at the hospital, right? Like, I think we're all thankful that he's out of the woodworks, at least it seems, with this illness, with the pneumonia. He ramped up in practice this week. It seems like he's trending to play. So Dezi, like, what could we expect from Deebo? Like, could we still expect that he might not be 100% conditioning wise this week, that he might get winded? Like, what, within a week, what can we expect?
Yeah, I suspect the reason for the hospitalization is to rule out anything else, right? Like if he was truly sick, they're just checking, okay, why are you this sick? Maybe they saw changes in his oxygen status and was like, okay, let's just make sure you didn't also throw a blood clot, or make sure there's not something else going on. Or to just definitively diagnose it or just get immediate treatment. So my thought is, if it's truly pneumonia, I mean, they're going to give you some good meds, including steroids, usually in a case like that, and steroids are our most potent anti-inflammatory. And if this is a viral pneumonia, that certainly can help turn him around pretty quickly and feel good. Although I don't have, listen, Deebo's on my fantasy team. I'm probably going to leave him on the bench this week. But, I don't know, even in the healthiest of athletes, pneumonia can kick your butt. And if you're not careful, it can bounce back. So I wouldn't expect a lot from Deebo. I would like to be surprised, but I wouldn't expect a lot.
When you bring up contagious, I'm trying to think of like the locker room situation. So I know Deebo and Ayuk's lockers are next to each other, and I know Ayuk's next to Lenoir. I don't think they're successive as far as like Deebo and Lenoir goes, but it's like close proximity. So yeah. Man, that's going to be tough if all of a sudden Sunday night we hear that, Lenoir is now having trouble breathing and Lenoir is not able to go 100%, because like that's one of their best players on the team. Like they really need him to play.
Well, the interesting thing about that is you can't expect the same symptoms. Just like with COVID, it was, when it first broke out, we were seeing people that had no symptoms all the way to people having pure respiratory, distress and ultimately worse than that. But, so even now, even with the flu, I've seen people like have flu and bounce back in 2 days. And I have people who have flu and they can't get over it 3 weeks later, so we're not, thankfully, I would hope that maybe it's just going to be Deebo that would have that, hopefully not Diamador Lenore, but I love that you've made that connection in the locker room. You're most contagious in that 24 to 48 hours of the fever. So if they didn't know that Deebo was having all this until right before game time, I just think about how many athletes on the team might have been exposed and potentially, spread.
I mean, that's exactly why a lot of people were concerned about the fact that Deebo was still on the sideline, even knowing that he was sick. And that's a whole nother conversation of why he was maybe still on the sideline. I don't know why that was, but yeah, definitely if it turns out to be something a little more serious for Lenore, definitely going to be getting those questions going forward. But Dezi, like I know we had an extended discussion today, but it was definitely warranted, and I really appreciate you adding a little more context to everything regarding the Ayuk and Deebo discussion as well. So there's a lot to talk about today for sure. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I wish these guys the best. I mean, guys, this is definitely giving 2020 vibes. It's been a tough pill to swallow, but thankfully we're playing a team that's almost as banged up as we are. So I think it might still be an evenly matched game. So let's see what we can do this week.
All right, Dezi. Well, we'll let you go, but thanks again for coming on the show, and me and KP will take it from here. Thank you. All right. So let's take a quick look at, the Cowboys injury report, because as Dezi mentioned, they are, hurting as well. You got Micah Parsons out for them. Their corner, Deron Bland, a couple other guys, Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle, John Stevens, backup tight end, and then a couple of questionable guys. But obviously the Parsons thing, Deron Bland, like that's huge for their defense. They've definitely been hurting without those guys on the field. So this could be an opportunity for the 49ers, even with their own injuries, right? I kind of feel like in a way they cancel each other out. But I still want the 49ers to capitalize on that opportunity.
So the Cowboys have been one of the teams with the lowest pressure rates in the NFL. That was with and without Parsons. So like no Parsons, no Lawrence, no Phillips. Like these are quality contributors, and Parsons is one of the best players in the NFL. So not having him, Kyle Shanahan actually spoke about that, where like, yes, my mind changes when he's not on the field. Absolutely. And you can understand why. So I think that'll allow the 49ers to be more aggressive without D-Law or Parsons. Obviously Bland was an all-pro. So there's a guy who can, he has a knack for being around the football. Kalen Carson was pretty solid earlier in the year. And if he can't go, if he's not 100%, one of his biggest issues actually coming out of college, he's a rookie, was tacklings. And, we know the 49ers are going to make you tackle in the run. Eric Kendricks, a veteran, Vigil, another guy. Like Zimmer loves to blitz his linebackers. If they're not 100%, maybe Zimmer's not as aggressive. So this injury report is very important. It's critical to the 49ers' success, I believe, but obviously none bigger than Parsons.
Yeah, and there's a few names that aren't listed here, right, because they're on injured reserve. DeMarcus Lawrence, Brandon Cooks as well, a couple of other guys that they're missing. So, yeah, everyone's comparing the 49ers season to 2020. This is looking like the Cowboys 2020 for them. So, yeah, definitely need the 49ers to step up to the occasion. And another thing that I'll mention, like I saw this, right, like Dalvin Cook, who was signed this offseason for the Cowboys, he might be activated and he might be making his season debut on Sunday, against the Niners. So that's just a little wild card. I don't know if I'm like concerned about it, but it's just something that like usually if there's someone you haven't seen yet in the season, like they could have a good game just because like it wasn't something you were expecting, or you didn't have game tape, at least from this season. But of course, there's a lot of game tape on Dalvin Cook from previous years. So I think the 49ers should be prepared for it either way. But I still think that's interesting, bit of a wild card anyway. So yeah, but in the meantime, let's look at some unfavorable matchups for the 49ers. And I continue to talk about special teams. Last week was the first time that I had the special teams for the 49ers as a unfavorable thing, right? And this week, it's not just because the 49ers are bad at special teams, but also because I look at the Cowboys, and that's actually the only thing they're probably good at is special teams. Their DVOA rankings is number 1 in special teams. 49ers, on the other hand, 31st. The 49ers are allowing 18.4 yards per punt return. That ranks last in the NFL. They're allowing 33.2 yards per kickoff return, which ranks 29th. I mean, we've seen it with our own eyes. Like, this isn't surprising to us, right? But when you look at both of these teams and their DVOA for special teams side by side, field goals, kickoffs, kick returns, punt returns, there's a big disparity there. Maybe not so much with the punts, but you know, this is enough to concern me, right?
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers are allowing punt returns. Like, that's the issue, right? It's Wisnowski. He's missing his spots, and he's missing them by a good margin. And not only that, because he's missing his spots, now the coverage teams are out of whack. And we saw last week on the long punt return that the Chiefs had, the 55-yarder, there are guys slipping. Like, that's not a coaching problem, man. They're just players who are supposed to be in the position that they need to be, and they're not. When it comes to like kickoffs and punts, like, if anything, just punt it out of bounds for a kickoff. Just kick it out of the end zone. Like, why is that such a struggle? And it's funny to hear Shanahan say, like, hey, like, we're trying to have touchbacks, but the kickers are missing it so bad that they're just not getting that. And when you don't have touchbacks, that's when you allow these long returns. And as you can see on the kick returns, these the opposing teams, they're getting out past like the 35. It's wild to see. And you would think like Anders Carlson being able to boot a 55-yarder with ease somehow gets worse the closer they get in field goal range. I don't know. I don't understand the struggle of just not being able to kick the ball out of bounds, not being able to, when all you do for 2 hours in practice is punt, not being able to hit your spots. So the tackling, the kicks, the punts, it has to be driving Shanahan insane and adding many, many gray hairs to him. Because, I mean, if you look at what the Cowboys are doing, Brandon Aubrey, like, he is probably the best kicker in the NFL. It seems like as soon as the 49ers, or as soon as Dallas crosses midfield, they're already in field goal range. So that's going to have to be something to keep an eye on, especially if, you know, the 49ers defense does what I expect it to. But the Cowboys should be able to steal some points just because they'll be in 49ers territory. Yeah,
and Brandon Aubrey missed practice this week, at least a couple of the days with jury duty, which is interesting. But he is going to play on Sunday night, so we could expect that he will be out there. On the topic of touchbacks, right? I do remember Kyle Shanahan saying, like, yes, like, we would like them to kick a touchback every time, but that doesn't always happen. Now, like, could he just say, like, just kick everything out of bounds? Like, I feel like that should be possible, right?
I mean, you would rather take the ball at, you know, the 35, 40 or whatever, as opposed to letting a house call go, getting the ball to midfield. I don't understand. And again, like, at some point, like, what do you do? Do you just put your starters, all of your starters, on special teams? And I don't know. Like, I'd be terrified to do that because that's where injuries happen. So they are in between a rock and a hard place. They just have to be better. Like, there's no other way to put it. It's tough. You think every week it's tough for them to get worse, but we're seeing the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Now, on the screen, to just kind of drive this point home for the last time, we're looking at special teams and turnover contribution, but I want everyone to focus on the special teams part of it. That's the left to right. And you see total points gained on special teams, right? The 49ers are past the -10 mark, and they're worse than any team here. So that just, again, underlines the issue that the 49ers are having here. And I do think that Kyle Shanahan is getting very frustrated. And so I have speculated that maybe the bye week is, if there are changes to be made, maybe the bye week's a time to do it. But anyway, let's look at the Cowboys defense really quick. And as we mentioned, there's some guys out and there's some big guys. This is important. Micah Parsons not going to be out there. So you got Carl Lawson instead, who's going to be there. Deron Bland out for this game. So you're going to have Andrew Booth Jr. instead. So I'm looking at this Cowboys defense, and there's really not much that would scare me about them right now.
Yeah, Carl Lawson, he's suffered multiple injuries. Obviously had a great career early on, but it's been a while. Like, he's 29 now, and he's trending in the wrong direction. He only played 6 games last year with the Jets. He's played 4 this year, and he only has a half sack. He's just not generating pressure. There's a giant drop off from Lawrence and Parsons, who's probably arguably the best combo at edge rusher in the NFL, to Lawson and Wheat. They just, like, the interior players that are listed right here, like, they are quality backups, and I guess I should say secondary players. But now that they're being pressed into a role where they have to be the prominent guy to get after the passer, they're just not contributing. I think the big part is being able to run on these guys, and that's where the 49ers should be able to really make their hay come Sunday.
You're always thinking the same way I am, KP, because that's exactly where I'm going to go next, is the favorable matchups. I'm going to be honest, like, my only unfavorable matchup for the 49ers this week is special teams, which we just discussed, right? And that's not me. Like, I swear I wasn't trying to be like cocky about this matchup. Yes, I think injuries could play a role for the 49ers, for the Cowboys here. But like I said, I kind of feel like they're a wash. And if anything, it might help the 49ers more so than anything. So, yeah, I do try to be objective, and I do try to get at least 3 unfavorable, 3 favorable. But this week, I couldn't find anything else favorable for the Cowboys, at least. So, yeah, we're going to head into the favorable matchups for the 49ers, and we're going to talk about Jordan Mason, because the Cowboys' run defense is bad. Like, it's just straight up bad, atrocious. Their run defense ranks 32nd in EPA per play, 30th in success rate allowed, 29th in DVOA. And they've gone up against some really good running backs this season. And in those games, they have given up a ton of yardage. Week 2 against Alvin Kamara, he had 20 carries, 115 yards, a touchdown. He also had a touchdown through the air as well. Week 3 against the Ravens, Derrick Henry had 25 carries, 151 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. And week 6, of course, going up against the two-headed beast in the Lions, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, 12 carries for both of them. For each of them, I should say. And Montgomery had 80 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Gibbs had 63 yards rushing, no touchdowns. But like this, I think this says it all. Like, whenever they've faced a good rushing team, they've gotten hosed. And I'm thinking, Jordan Mason, like, this is your time, buddy, because the sea should open up for him.
The Saints are not a good rushing team either, and Kamara, like, still had success. Obviously, the Ravens and Lions are, like, as good as it gets, and the 49ers, they're closer to the Ravens and Lions than they are the Saints. Like, if you watch Dallas, they just do not stop the ball. Like, they play soft. Like, how Jared Mayo was calling his team soft, like, he was probably talking about and watching the Cowboys when he watched them play, because they just do not seem all that interested in tackling. And when that's your mindset against a team with, like, Trent Williams, and think about, like, Pooney, he's been really good so far with their aggressive mindset, and with a runner like Mason. And I think coming into this week, knowing that, hey, like, this might be the last week that Mason's going to be the bell cow with Christian McCaffrey coming back after the bye week, I am respectfully, I'm running him into the ground, and I'm giving him like 25 to 30 carries. Hey, man, run your butt off. Go get 150 for us. We're going to need it. You're going to have a week off after this. Probably not going to need you for another 10 to 15 carries a game, or that's going to be around what you get moving forward. This is a team that not only struggles, like, so to quantify what EPA per play is, that just tells you they're giving up big plays at the highest rate in the NFL to quantify what success rate means on a down-to-down basis. They are not stopping the run. And then DVOA just adjusts for schedule. So no matter how you slice it up, they are bottom 3, bottom 4 in every metric that there is. And you can probably go just down the line even more, dig deeper. So it's not surprising. And those numbers were with Parsons on the field, who's a very good player against the run. Those numbers were with Lawrence. And now they have backups playing. And the backups like Lawson was signed to be a pass rusher, like a part-time pass rusher. Now he has to play the run full-time. The other guy, Wheat, probably the same thing. So this is going to be an opportunity to really get the running game going. And I would imagine we see running the ball early and often in this game. And Mason should have a big one.
That's a great point, not just from the matchup perspective that, of course, the 49ers want to take advantage of that, but also, like the fact that this is probably the last time he's going to have to start a game. That is, if Christian McCaffrey does return in week 9, like we're all expecting him to. So, you might as well not be as conservative maybe with Mason as you have been through these few weeks. And this is the perfect matchup to just let him run loose. And especially with the way that Brock Purdy struggled last week, you're down a few weapons. No Brandon Ayuk, no Juwan Jennings. Why not, right? I think this is the time that you got to just let him loose. And this is a great matchup for that. So definitely looking forward to that. Now, on the same token of the 49ers offense, and I know what we've been saying about this offense, the red zone offense for the 49ers in particular has been awful, right? There's no way around that. But if there's any week for the 49ers to have a little more success in the red zone, it would be against this Cowboys defense, because they've allowed a touchdown on 73.7% of their opponents' red zone trips. That's 31st in the league. 49ers defense, just for comparison, is 22nd, and they're 31st in opponent points allowed per game with 28. So this is looking like a good matchup too, just for the 49ers to maybe try some different things in the red zone, maybe for Jordan Mason to have more success in the red zone, which he hasn't had this season. I think this makes some way for that.
Yeah, and when you get into red zone, generally speaking, if you can't stop the run, you're going to give up a bunch of touchdowns. And that's exactly what you see on the screen here. So the 49ers, the only time they struggle to run the ball is in the red zone. So maybe this is a really good get-right spot for them. And I think, again, just tying it back to the offensive line, they'll be able to create movement. So they are 3rd in the NFL in adjusted line yards, which basically accounts for how many yards the line is accounting for before the running back actually carries the ball. So knowing that they are that good at creating movement up front, Brock Purdy should be living in 2nd and 4s, 3rd and 3s, and that'll go a long way, because it's a step down in class from what they faced last week. The Chiefs were one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. They've been that way for a couple seasons now, and they also are a very physical and aggressive tackling team. None of those things would you say in the same sentence with this Cowboys defense. So I do agree that is a good time, basically just to get right. And I think that the offensive line is kind of being undersold here, but at the same time, it's a good opportunity in this red zone to get a guy like Pearsall going. So Dallas is one of the worst teams at defending wide receiver 2s. Obviously, no Brandon Ayuk, so it'll be interesting to see how they defend the 49ers in general. But they give up a lot of yardage and a lot of quality yardage to wide receiver 2s. So I think this could be a sneaky good spot for Ricky Pearsall under the lights. And I remember saying last week, hey, Shanahan, maybe give Pearsall a screen early on. They did late to Pearsall and Cowan. And that'll be – Cowan got 9 yards in the red zone, so maybe seeing some screens, seeing one of those screens pop might make sense in the red zone.
Yeah, and since we expect the 49ers to have more success with the run game, maybe we'll see more play action. I mean, I think screens are a good idea as well, just mixing it up a little bit so that when you do have pass plays, they're of the explosive kind, right? Right. I think that's what this is kind of shaping up to be for the 49ers. It's definitely there for the taking.
This is where missing McCaffrey really hurts. Sorry to cut you off, but
absolutely. Yes.
they are dead last at defending passes against running backs. So like when you said Mason, yes, but like to have McCaffrey would probably have 100 yards receiving. And that sounds like an exaggeration, but I feel like Shanahan would scheme up McCaffrey and not just running like short routes out of the backfield, but he'd be throwing the ball down the field to McCaffrey, and McCaffrey would eat against the Cowboys. So like down the line in the next couple of weeks, like that's where the 49ers will really, their offense should really take a step ahead. But it does suck that he won't be able to suit up for this one.
Yeah, it's crazy how much like McCaffrey not being there gets this offense kind of feeling stuck in the mud a little bit. Like it's crazy that's with like how good this offense is, like how many star players they have, right? And they still have Kyle Shanahan, but like Christian McCaffrey is the one that makes it all move. Like it's just been crazy. I think we all have a greater appreciation for what he is, his skill set, and what he adds to this offense. I mean, he takes it to another level. I think we all know that. So yeah, we're definitely looking forward to having him back after the bye. Definitely, I expect the offense to look completely different when he's back. So yeah. Let's take a quick look at the Cowboys offense. All right. So not too many injuries here, although we did mention Brandon Cooks. You know, he's been on IR. You got Dak Prescott. You have Rico Dowdle, who is he's kind of become the lead back as of late, right? They did sign Ezekiel Elliott this offseason, brought him back, but he's washed, you know, like he didn't add too much to their offense. Who would have thought? So Rico Dowdle has kind of been the guy that has stepped up in recent weeks, but he's not exactly like a world beater either. I would say, like, obviously CeeDee Lamb is probably the biggest threat here in this offense. They still have a pretty good offensive line. I'll say that. Jake Ferguson, I think, is a favorite, one of the favorite targets of Prescott. And then you got Jalen Tolbert, who role has grown since Cooks has been out too. But I mean, for the most part, I guess, like, I'm not too afraid of this Cowboys offense. One, because like they've looked discombobulated this year as well. And then a lot of, you know, CD, the 49ers have faced him before. 49ers have faced Dak before. And yeah, they've had some success, but you know, in the last 3-4 matchups, they haven't been able to beat the Niners with their offenses that were arguably at that time better than they are now. So yeah, I'm just like, this isn't moving me very much. I think my only concern, KP, would be if the unthinkable happens and Lenore, like we were saying, like Lenore with that illness, maybe if he's out, like that would be my only concern. But otherwise, I'd feel pretty good about this going up against the Cowboys offense.
So when I say Lenore is like one of their best players, like he legitimately can cover in, like he's been above and beyond even what I thought he was in the preseason. So like according to DVOA, the 49ers are the best in the NFL by a long shot at guarding slot receivers, at guarding like quote unquote wide receiver threes. And that's exactly what CeeDee Lamb is. Last week, Lenore was running stride for stride with like Xavier Worthy, who's like the fastest person in the NFL. He looks good. There was one play that people might remember that was a third down, but that was just Mahomes scrambling, right? Dak's not much of a scrambler. Renardo Green is taken over as the starting starting cornerback. He played the majority of snaps. Isaac Yiadom only played 5 snaps on defense last year, so I think the tide's already turned in there. Green looked really good. He had one play where he just busted in zone, but again, like he's so physical. These receivers are not the kind of players who beat the 49ers. I know CeeDee Lamb is a great player. I'm not downplaying that one bit. But the way Lenore has played this year and the way that I assume Sorensen will defend him, they should be able to take him away in the red zone. He's definitely going to eat. That's what they do. They're going to force feed him the ball. Yeah. And off a bye week, you expect him to have a plan. But knowing that your other targets are Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks, hey, Green, hey, Mooney, go take these guys away. We're going to put the safety over the top of Lamb, have Lenore shield or follow him, and be good. And if you want to throw the ball to Jake Ferguson or Fred Warner, beat us that way. Prove it. But there's a reason that the Cowboys are like so low in a lot of passing metrics is because teams just take Lamb away and there's nowhere else for Dak to throw. Like he has to manufacture a lot. And by the time like they do get Ferguson going, it's too late. So this offense is not very good. Like, just to put it bluntly, they're going to try to get Lamb involved, and I'm sure they're going to have some tricks up their sleeves off a bye. But outside of like BB and Martin are good offensive linemen, and I think Steele is like, they are good in like pass protection because that's all they do. But when you're constantly facing 3rd and long, 2nd and 8, because you can't run the ball, you're behind the 8 ball, and no offense can overcome that. And that's consistently what the Cowboys are doing. They've been outscored by 66 points this year. And they're 500, so it seems like they're playing well, but they've been getting smoked in some of these games. And the games where they're not, like, it was 20-15, and Daniel Jones is the quarterback. It was 20-17, and Justin Fields was the quarterback. Those are not the quarterbacks or the offenses the Cowboys are going to go up against this week. So this unit is going to have to score, and I just don't think they can. And again, like, if you just think back to last week, the 49ers had the Chiefs dead to rights so many different times, but Mahomes would scramble on a 3rd down or in the red zone. If they instead of going 4 out of 5, if it's 3 out of 5, if it's 2 out of 5, we're talking about a 49ers win, or 49ers have a chance at the end of the game. So they're due for some regression in both red zone defense and when it comes to 3rd down. So I really like this matchup for the 49ers. I think we see the best version of the 49ers defense this Sunday, because they were a little bit sloppy in tackling, and that's easy to clean up. But I don't think the matchups really dictate or favor the Cowboys.
I think so too. And like that's honestly why I only had the one unfavorable for the 49ers this week. Cause like, I just think the way they match up, it overwhelmingly favors the 49ers. And that's why everyone is saying, right? Like, if the 49ers manage to lose this game,
yikes,
they're in some deep shit. So like, they have to get this done. Everything is pointing towards the 49ers being able to have their way against this Dallas team. So yeah, I'm banking on that as well. And yeah, I mean, the other thing too, that's a favorable, right? The Cowboys have been turning the ball over quite a bit this season. And I think the one thing that I'll talk about, like, Dak struggles against the Niners. It reminds me of like how the Niners play like Geno Smith too. Like, it doesn't matter how much success they have outside of playing the 49ers. And like, as we were talking about, like, the Cowboys haven't had that much success offensively this year, but just in general, like, I think just the way that they match up, Dak seems to struggle with it. He hasn't beaten the Niners since 2017. I talk about the mental aspect of it too. Like, what did we say last week, right? Like, I think the mental aspect of playing the Chiefs, might be too much.
Human nature is real.
And I think for the Cowboys and for Dak, like, it's become this mental thing of playing the Niners as well. Never mind also all the pressure that's going into this game, because the Cowboys are in desperation mode just as much as the 49ers, right? Who can handle that pressure and that desperation a little bit better? Well, the past has shown me that the 49ers would rise to the occasion a little bit better than Dak would, right? Or the Cowboys would. So I'm definitely thinking about that in this game. And yeah, the last 3 times that these teams have played each other, Dak has thrown 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions collectively in those games. This season alone, Dallas ranks 29th in turnover margin, 30th in giveaways per game, 31st in turnover rate. So 17.2% of all of their possessions in a turnover. That's not good. So like, just like last week, right? The 49ers are going to have the opportunity for turnovers. They need to capitalize on it. And I think one of those things that we saw last week is that the 49ers had those opportunities. They didn't have success turning it into 7 points, right? Like, and that's because the Chiefs have one of the best red zone defenses in all of football. We just talked about the Cowboys red zone defense, right? So I feel a lot better about the 49ers being able to capitalize, being able to get 7 points off of the Cowboys turnovers that seem like they're definitely going to happen just based on the history of the Cowboys this season. So I feel good about the 49ers being able to exploit that.
Yeah, and think about it for Dax. Like, he knows, hey, if I don't score here, we are going to give something up on the other side. So I need to press and I need to try to make something happen. And that's when the mistakes come. And that's when you're trying to do too much. I think something that we need to bring up here when I talk about regression, what if I told you the Cowboys' red zone offense when it comes to touchdown percentage was worse than the 49ers and significantly worse? And I think that matters too, because again, if you can't stop the ball or run the ball in the red zone, you are not going to be successful. And that's who Dallas is. So Dallas, they're scoring a touchdown on 37.5% of the time. That is second to last in the NFL. The 49ers, like, they're 45%. So they're significantly better in the red zone for all the stuff that we give them. Like, they're scoring at a much higher clip than the Cowboys are. So like understanding that Dallas is going to move the ball, they just holding the field goals, right? Holding the field goals. Maybe one of those turns out to be a Kalia Davis batted ball turnover, because the 49ers have been coming up with those pretty consistently, actually. If you just go through the game logs, week before, Malik Mustafa had a red zone interception. So they're finding ways to generate turnovers. With that in mind, capitalize, limit to field goals, and I just don't know how we're talking about a lot. I think people picking Dallas is trendy this week just because no Brandon Ayuk. They think that the 49ers are down to the dumps, but I really think they're selling the 49ers short of like what they are on both sides of the ball. And I was very impressed with the defense. I know that they had like 5 or 6 plays that were kind of knuckleheadish, but I thought they played really well. I thought they have all season, and I think Shanahan's going to come out guns a-blazing on the offensive side. So I do feel confident in this one.
I agree. And just another thing that I think helps the defense in this case, like I said, similar to when they played the Seahawks, Dallas is 32nd in rushing yards per game. So that they're averaging almost as many pass attempts per game as the Seahawks. I love that because, again, like I talked about it that week as well, when you come into the game one-dimensional already, you're making the defense's job easier, right? And we talked about Dallas's running game, and it's not that great. So we'll see if they get Rico Dowdle more involved. We'll see if Dalvin Cook adds anything, right? But, just
Dalvin
looking
Cook
at so far, just looking at so far, I'm not too worried about that, because then the 49ers defense know what to expect. They can pin their ears back, get after Dak, or just cover and, wait for an interception. Like, I don't know. I just think it'll all work in the 49ers' favor. At least that's what it's looking like.
If the Cowboys' magic pill is to rely on Dalvin Cook after the bye week, then it is going to be a sad, sad, rude awakening, because, last year he had 67 carries for the Jets. He averaged 3.2 yards per carry. His long on the season came in the very first week, and that was 15. He did not have another double-digit gain until week 12. That is not the answer. Dowdle, how you talk, like, he just runs straight. Like, it's not like he's overly powerful. It's not like he's a speedster. It's like the type of running backs that really give the 49ers problems are like the James Connors, right? The big bruising but fast and agile types. That's not in the Cowboys' backfield, and they know that Zeke's not the answer too. So when you're one-dimensional against the 49ers defense, that's when they can pin their ears back. And that's when Nick Bosa really comes to life, because now he's going to be able to go against Terrence Steele, who has a blown block percentage that is higher than Colton McKivitz, that is higher than any 49ers offensive lineman. It's 4.4. And he's basically giving up multiple pressures a game, like upwards to like 3 pressures a game. So like the 49ers really do a good job of highlighting the weak link on the offensive line and getting over on them and taking advantage of them. They did that against the Patriots. They did that against the Seahawks. And I assume they're going to do it again here against the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think so too. It's definitely shaping up to be that way for the 49ers. So yeah, I'm definitely expecting that they come away with a win in this one. That isn't just me being a homer. I think, we're looking at how they match up with each other. And
you picked them to lose last week. You're not a homer.
What was that?
I said you picked them to lose last week. You're not a homer.
I did. Yeah. And, I hated to be right on that, but a part of me was glad that I did that, because it's like I proved to myself I'm not just a homer. But KP, appreciate you, man. And if you guys haven't checked out KP's latest preview on Niners Nation, make sure you guys do that. based on the title, I know what you're expecting with this game. It says the 49ers fell to last place in the NFC West, but that could change by Sunday night. And pretty much, I'm sure you go over some of the same topics we discussed here today as well. So make sure you guys check that out on Niners Nation. KP, as always, thank you so much. Dezi, thank you. And then everyone that tuned in, thank you guys so much. But for me, KP, have a good rest of your weekend and enjoy Sunday without the day slate, without having to stress about your team. We'll wait till Sunday night with the bright lights. But all right, folks, peace.